Hello and welcome to my Unity 3D character movement and animation tutorial. In this tutorial you will learn how to make a character move and loop a move animation, as well as how to make a character jump. I assume for this tutorial that you know the basics of Unity and scripting, and that you have a character imported into Unity with a loopable move animation. Because the character will be moved through scripts and rigid bodies, this animation should not change the character's position. First, let's take a look at the scene I will be working with. For this tutorial, I will be using this scene. It has my character model in it, and a floor, and a camera, and a light. The floor has to be thick, can't just be a plane, and it has to have a box collider as well as a rigid body. The character should also have a box collider, and it should have a rigid body, but its rigid body should be slightly different. You want to make sure you have gravity enabled, and you want to freeze the rotation on the X, Y, and Z axes. Along with your rigid body and box collider, your character should have an animation component. For this tutorial, I will be working in 2D space. The character will move only left and right and jump up and down. He won't be walking around the whole plane, but these concepts that I present in this tutorial can be applied to 3D as well. Now that we've got the basic layout of the scene in mind, we can start with the scripting. In this tutorial we will be making three scripts: ground detection, jump, and lateral movement. Ground detection is used by our character base to detect when our character is on the ground. Jump makes our character jump and uses ground detection to determine when our character can jump. Lateral movement works by itself to move our character back and forth and animate it. We are going to start with lateral movement. As you can see, I've set up a few variables before we started. The first two variables, left button and right button, correspond to the right and left buttons in my axis. As you can see, the input, the name is for my buttons are A and D, as well as the keys. So A will move our character left and D will move our character right. You're going to need to set up your input before you work with your script. The most important thing here is that the names of these buttons match the names you put here. Forward and is just a simple vector. DT I won't go into detail about. Left and right rotation are used to rotate our character. Suspended and move speed are used in the script to control different things. So let's start with writing the code. First of all, if our script is suspended, we want to return without doing anything. But since right now we can't change the suspension, I'm going to write a function here so our other scripts can access this variable and set it. So they can set it to false or true with this method. The next thing we want to check in our update method is if our input has detected that the left button is active. So in other words, if the character is pressing the button, this will give us constant movement, not just movement when the character actually has pressed the button. The first thing we want to do is set the rotation so that our character is facing the correct direction. Let me check and make sure I got that rotation correct. It's actually Y here. You want Y, the Y rotation to equal that. Next, you need to translate your character by accenting its transform component again and calling translate on it. You want to translate it forward times the move speed and delta time. Those will affect how much it moves forward. And you also want to access its animation component and have it play your animation. This name, this string has to match the name of your animation. The animation I'm looking for is walk 002, as you can see in our animation component. So I set that there. Now we also need to check if the right button is down and move it right if it is down. This code is very similar. I'm just going to copy paste it and make one change. So we want our rotation to be facing right instead of left. That's all we need for this script. Now if we apply it to our elf, it should work, or whatever model you're using. It should pop up down here, and when you hit play, the buttons you set to its movement keys should control your character. That's it for the lateral movement. We'll be moving into jump and ground detection next. Before we write the jump script, I want to write the ground detection script. Before we write the ground detection script, I want to go into detail about exactly what it is. If you don't already have a character base for your model, you're going to need to make one. You don't need to have its rendering component. As you can see, I've removed it. But you do need a box collider, and make sure that isTrigger is set to true. Now the way our script is going to work is that when the character base collides with the ground, a variable will be set to true, and when it stops colliding with the ground, the variable will be set to false. Then our jump script will access the script and access that variable to determine when we can and can't jump. The actual coding of this script is pretty simple. Unity has two built-in functions that are used with collisions called onTriggerEnter and onTriggerExit, and they are called when there's a collision, or when was a collision and one of the colliders moved away. So onTriggerEnter is when there is a collision. So if there's a collision between our character base, then we want to make sure that we set the on-ground variable to true. Since we've just collided with something, we're on something. If our character base leaves a collision, then we want to set on-ground to false, because our character is no longer touching an object. That's about it for ground detection. We should apply it to our character base and make sure it's working. So it starts out false and then it turns to true when the character base hits. Now that we have our ground detection script set up, we can work on our jump script. Before we do that, I want to go into a little bit of detail about exactly how this will work. When our character is on the ground and the player presses a button, it should make him jump. And gravity applied from this character's rigid body will make him fall back down to the ground. I want there to be a slight delay in between when each jump, which will be a jump delay variable, will set up, and basically that's it. So let's go ahead and open up the script, and again I have a few variables set up here, and I'll go over them with you. Delta time, again, I don't want to go into too much detail about that. If you don't know what it is, you should look it up. Jump button corresponds to the key that controls when the character jumps in the input axis. I'm using the default Unity jump button here. You can change this, or you can make a new button, but make sure the name matches this name. Jump force is how high the character will jump, and the jump delay is how long in between each jump the player has to wait before jumping again. Can jump and time since last jump are used in the script to determine when it can jump. We'll see that in a minute. The base is the character base that is a child of the tutorial elf. So we get the game object the script is attached to, and we get the component in the children ground detection. This will be the script attached to our base. And then we also want to look for the movement script so we can suspend movement at the appropriate time. So again, we look at the game object the script is attached to and get the lateral movement component. First thing we need to do here is increment the time since last jump by dt. That will become clear in a little while. Next, we need to check if the character is on the ground. So we access the base, we access the on-ground Boolean variable. If the character is on the ground, you should certainly be able to move, so we need to set our suspension to false. So in other words, the character is not suspended. He can move. Next, we need to check if we are on the ground and the time since the last jump is greater than the jump delay, we should be able to jump again, so we set that variable. Another thing we need to check if we're not on the ground and we don't have air control. This will be a method I set up in a minute. Then we should not be able to control our character. So we set the suspension to true this time. Now we're going to write that method. You can make this whatever you want. You could have a time after the character jumped using the time since last jump variable, or you could do a variety of things. For now, I just want to use a fairly simple check. So we could get the rigid body that's attached to our character model. You can see it over here. And if you can't, you need to make sure you attach one. Then we get the velocity and we check if it's greater than 0. So in other words, if our character has upwards velocity and is moving up, we want him to be able to control. Otherwise, if he's going down, we don't want him to be able to have air control. This will only be used in this condition check right here, so we don't have to worry about this interfering with movement while it's not in the air. One last thing we need to do is check if we can jump and the player is trying to jump. So in other words, the jump button is down. Then we need to make our character jump. The way we do that here is just access the rigid body component again, get its velocity in the upwards direction, and add the jump force. Another thing we want to do is some cleanup here. We want to make sure can jump is false, because if we just jumped, we can't jump again. And time since last jump needs to be set to 0 since we just jumped, so there's been no time since the last jump. Now, if I've done everything correctly and we apply the script, we should be able to move our character and make him jump. We have a compiler error here. I found the error in the jump script. I had move here instead of movement. You need to fix that before you move on. There's also another slight error here, that we want our time since last jump to start out at a higher value than the jump delay, so we can jump immediately. We don't have to wait. Now if you hit play, your character should be able to move right and move left and jump. If you notice, our variables down here, can jump works correctly. We can't jump till after the delay, and we're on the ground. If you look at our character base, it's also detecting the ground correctly, and our lateral movement is working. If you want to change some of these values, you can. It'll affect how the program runs. That's it for this tutorial. I hope it helped, and thanks for watching.